Good afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of Farming Alaska here. I'm really thrilled today and a bit honored, honestly, for this kind of caliber of guest here. But we have Shelley Hughes, who is running for governor of Alaska here. And I just want to say thank you. I'm really touched that you actually reached out to me. And, I thought about reaching out to some candidates to talk about ag, but you beat me to the punchline, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I want to give Tarn Coffee.
I love Tarn.
Yeah, he's the one actually suggested and wanted us to connect. And, working in the legislature, I was in the House 4 years, Senate 8 years. I've been the champion for agriculture, really primarily in the last couple years as I've understood the potential that, frankly, Dylan, we haven't tapped yet. And so I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah. If you've watched the show before, that's one of my big drums to beat, which is agriculture in the state's an untapped resource. We were talking about this a little bit on the phone, and I've talked to people about this internationally, but we're at the same latitude as like Scandinavia, so Finland, Sweden, and Norway, and they don't have the same problems we do.
Yeah, in fact, that was an eye-opener for me when I discovered that they export about, Scandinavia exports about $10 billion in ag products per year. And what does Alaska do? We import about $3 billion. Scandinavia does have a little bit of a warmer ocean current, so it's not identical to what we have, but it does really say we've got a lot of potential. And we are pretty much like 50th in the nation of the 50 states as far as our ag production. And we happen to be the largest state. We're 2.5 times the size of Texas.
It kind of drives me nuts. We have more land than anybody. You think we could do better than importing 99% of our food.
Yeah, we have a lot of mountains and glaciers.
True.
And that is true. And one of the reasons I am so excited to be on here, I'm the only candidate right now that's talking about ag.
I can vouch for that, actually.
It's near and dear to my heart. And just a little bit of background. You go back a couple generations, my family, they were farmers in Nebraska. And
what did you guys farm?
Corn.
Corn, okay.
And I was actually there, not this summer, but the year before, to see some of the family farmland. And they were having a tough year as far as rain and such. But, those are my roots. And when I first came to Alaska, this will be probably of great interest, actually, to people in Alaska, but for your out-of-state people. I came up as a teenager in the 70s to Southeast Alaska, and it was a faith community, actually, and it's just people who wanted to get away, raise their children in a wholesome environment. And we got some property 3 miles from the town of Hoona. There was no road. You had to take a boat, and we had a big mud flat that was almost a mile long. If the tide was out, you had to tromp through the sticky mud. But we built cabins. We had a sawmill. We built a school. And
really,
wow. we were farming, and we had, we were trying to live off the land the most we could. We still had to go to Juneau and get the groceries. Go on the ferry, but we were growing a lot of stuff, and also harvesting what was growing there naturally, like raspberries, and we'd go out clamming and fishing and hunting. But we did a lot of farming, and I spent a lot of times in the fields, in the gardens. It was a really fun time of my life.
Mm.
I was young. It's where I met my husband, and my first son was born. And I have very fond memories and have stayed in touch with a lot of people and still go back there and visit. Now there's a logging road. It's a little easier to get there. And, the little town of Hoona it's an Alaska Native Tlingit Haida area, and they would call us the Pilgrims, because we came up from the lower 48. But we became great friends with everyone in town, and it was a really good time. So that's got a little bit of ag. And then I lived after that out in Bethel, and then up in Fort Yukon above the Arctic Circle, and then in Fairbanks for a season, and then down in Seward on the Kenai Peninsula, and finally in 1990 in Palmer, which, we're kind of started out as a farming community, and so we have farming here in the Mat-Su. So I've had that connection. And my very first bill when I was in the House was actually to allow local governments to give farmers a tax break. Of course, the local government has to decide to do that, give them a property tax. Fairbanks Borough has done it. Matsu has not yet done it. It's been floated. They haven't done it. But, my bill allowed that and put that on state statute. And, you might want to talk to your Matsu Borough Assembly about that at some point. But so that was my very first piece of legislation related to ag. And I've really come full circle now in the last couple of years. We put in law a 2.5-year task force on food security, food independence. And I was honored to chair that, which is unusual because at the time I was in the minority. Normally minority members aren't given much of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asked to chair that, and we had I think we had 35 members, and we had put hundreds of hours in it. And in the end, Dylan, task force are supposed to issue reports. That's what the legislation said. Issue a report, and we did. But I'm proud to say we didn't do a boring narrative that is collecting dust on a shelf. What we did is every recommendation, I believe we were up at about 27 or 29 or something, became almost like a guide or a recipe how to get this done. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Here's who would be involved and responsible. Does this take a law change, yes or no? If it takes one, what would it need to be? Who's going to be responsible for it? What are the steps to get there? What are the timeline? And so that is now available. And some of those things are now being worked on. And a lot of them in Alaska are really big picture, like infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, really big. We also addressed the food security issues in the rural areas as well, which is it's a whole different thing than here in South Central.
Folks don't realize that, I've lived in a village. You've lived in a village, but logistically that's the number one challenge. It's not, and there are some creative solutions I've seen, like Connex farms and whatnot, but really logistics play in those. So agriculture really isn't brought up in our state, especially for our national viewers, like it is in Nebraska or Montana or Wyoming. But so what is your motivation to keep bringing it to Juneau? As a farmer, I personally appreciate just having it brought up and as part of the conversation, but I haven't heard any other legislators or senators or many people even bring up ag in Alaska. So what's your motivation behind continuing to champion this?
There's several reasons. One of them is that I think it is risky to be dependent on outside sources because we could be cut off from them, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's the Port of Seattle going on strike, some kind of disruption in our world. So the closer the food is to us, it's less risky. So it's a security thing. And also, it's an economic thing that we talked about earlier as far as with Scandinavia versus Alaska. So there's an economic opportunity. And then the other, which is it's a good reason, it's maybe seen more as a benefit, but you've probably read about when you harvest something, every day that goes by after it's harvested, its nutritional value goes down.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're barging up things that were harvested, 17 days ago or 9 days ago, we're not getting the same nutritional value out of it if we grew it here. And, our health and well-being is pretty doggone important, for our kids. They need good nutrition when they're growing up. And so there's that benefit too. But it's probably more the security thing and the economic thing that really got me going. But when I heard the nutritional piece, I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense now. We are the highest cost place in the United States for healthcare, and the United States is the highest cost place in the world. So we're the highest cost place on the planet. So if we can improve our health through locally grown foods, that makes sense. So, and it tastes better.
It does. It does.
It tastes better.
If you haven't had a carrot from Palmer, you're missing out. It's way better.
Take a My understanding, I don't know if they still are, but Bakersfield, California, at some point
Mhm.
was the carrot capital of the United States or the world. Take a Bakersfield carrot versus a Palmer carrot. Night and day, the Palmer carrot is sweet because our temperatures are cold, our soils are cold at night, and the carbs convert to sugar. So they're so much better. We should be the carrot capital of the world.
I agree.
Yeah, we just should.
So what are some ideas or strategies that, if you were to win this race, you would want to implement as governor to promote agriculture?
Well, it's interesting in the process of the 2.5-year task force, as we looked at all these things, and you're saying this needs to be done and that needs to be done. It's nothing. Everything is going to take a lot of persistence and over time. So it's like you need somebody that kind of can be responsible for it all to make sure it happens. And one of the things in the study is, in looking at all this, we realized all the other states have a Department of Agriculture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of overseeing to make sure all these components and everything's functioning and the farmer gets the support they need. And so that became the number one priority of our 2.5 years of work. You need a Department of Ag. But I want to say, I know you farmers out there, you do not want a bureaucracy hovering over you and putting controls on you and making things burdensome. And we don't either. That's not what we want. We want a department that's making sure you get the support you need, the technical assistance you might need. That is, you're making sure you get the research that you need, so you know what is the best way to go about things, or what is all those kinds of support systems in place, and also any opportunities that might be coming down the pike from USDA and all that kind of thing, and really to be opening doors. And so one of the things that is a struggle is the access to land.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're growing here, back in the early days, we were kind of where all the ag was happening. Now you have stuff happening up in Delta. You have some opportunities up in Nenana, and as our population is growing, those are of interest now, and so land availability is a priority. And as governor, I am going to release more land for ag. I'm also going to release more land for housing, for affordable housing. That's a national crisis. It's pretty bad up here.
Why don't you touch on that for a minute then? That's interesting. Are you
Yeah.
talking about like homesteading, like bringing back homesteading?
Yeah, I want to bring back some homesteading
okay.
for ag land, but also even in a community, a young couple, it's very expensive for them to live up here. And so we're losing, I'm calling it a brawn and brain drain. They used to talk about a brain drain. Our college, kids go off to college and they don't come back.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the brawn drain now because so many young people choose not to go to college and those kind of careers. And so we're losing the brawn as well. And part of it is it's expensive. Housing is expensive. Groceries are expensive. So that's actually part of my I don't call it a vision because that sounds like fluff. Like you got these lofty ideas.
Yeah,
No,
they've kind of run that word into the dirt.
yeah, it's an action plan of very specific solutions and very specific steps to make things more affordable. Part of it is not talking about cheap energy, but actually achieving it on multiple fronts: the gas line, hydro, using our we have very clean coal and power plants near that source. The small nuclear reactors and all of that. So you bring your power down, then everything is more expensive because it's overhead of everything. And, your groceries go down, everything. Running our schools goes down. So low energy and access to land are really important for economic strength and for individual and family prosperity. So those are very tangible outcomes I want to see to bring to fruition. But the homestead thing is really exciting because I know you have listeners out there that are not from Alaska, and I invite you to our state, and I invite you actually to support me as governor. And actually, you can check out my website alaskansforhughes.com because it takes money to win. And if there's going to be a homestead act to give you an opportunity to come be a farmer or a rancher up in this state, an ag producer, I need to be governor so we can release land. So we have state lands we can release. But here's the other thing, that especially if you're farming on the East Coast or even in the central part, the kind of the breadbasket of the lower 48. Our state, when we were brought into the union, 64% of our state, no, 63, I'm sorry, went to the federal government. That was what we had to pledge and hand over to join the union. There's something called the equal footing doctrine that all the states were supposed to be brought into the union on equal footing. We were not. And if you look as an example, the state of New York, less than 1% of New York is owned by the federal government. So part of my plan is to work to get some of that federal land grab that happened in 1959 when we became the 49th state, to try to get some of that back. And I think the current federal administration, it's very keen on supporting small and family farms and food independence. I also think they would understand that we got the shaft. We got the shaft at statehood.
Well, I'd say, that if you were able to pull that off, it'd have national repercussions because, don't be wrong, Alaska got the shaft, but a lot of the western states
there are
did.
some others.
Yeah.
Nevada's in bad shape. There's a number of states I think that would join us in that effort. So I think it's a fight worth taking on. I think it's the right thing to do. I don't know how it'll all pan out, but as governor, it would be a priority. And if it didn't work out, I would regret not trying because I think it's the right thing to do. And
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. And at statehood, we also had to give up as Alaskans our subsurface rights as well. So you're giving away, acreage, and you're giving away your beneath the surface rights. So we really kind of got the double shaft. So I think it's a fight worth taking on, and it's important to food independence. So a Homestead Act would have a component for larger swaths of land for whether it's ranching or farming, and then smaller for those in communities. You don't need 300 acres to build a house if you're in a community, right? A half acre.
Trust me, you don't want 300 acres.
Yeah. So I think that that's going to be a priority, and I'm like your national listeners, you want a great place, a beautiful place to farm. This is it. It's a little bit challenging. We know. Dylan, you've probably talked about the challenges here in a northern climate and the short season, but there's all kinds of innovative things happening. And one of the things I forgot to tell you, the second bill that I did a few years after that first one that could relieve farmers of property taxes that are in local boroughs and municipalities is I got the industrial hemp out from under the criminal statutes, so it could be defined as an ag product.
Very interesting. You brought up both releasing land and industrial hemp. I reached out when I knew you were coming on the show to a couple of farmers. I said, if you have any questions you want me to ask Shelley, let me know. And number one was, what are the goals with releasing land? We want more land. I am personally the chairman of the Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee with the Alaska Farm Bureau. And the number one problem young farmers and ranchers face is access. Entry into this industry is very capital intensive anywhere in the world, but in Alaska, it's nigh impossible for young people. So, and the second question was, are there any plans with the industrial hemp? Because I saw the other day there's people wanting to build a mill for it right here in Point McKenzie, and they've approached me and other farmers here saying, would you grow hemp if there was a port? It's like, I don't know, can I? Like, I know the regulations are kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about hemp, but there is one other land point I want to make because part of, and maybe your discussions and on your committee it's come up too, but the state Department of Natural Resources is reviewing, and it's supposed to be a cycle on land use, and sometimes they get way behind schedule. And one of the things is if we discover an area of land that would be really good, say, the farmer needs it for grazing or whatever, that we not have to wait that whole time that might get delayed 10 years, 12 years, 14 years before we reevaluate it and allow it to be used for that, so that that food security becomes a priority. It can bump up a reevaluation of that. So it can be put to use, and let's do it really, really cheaply, $1 an acre or whatever the state could, if it's land that would make more sense to lease very cheaply, let's do that. So I just want to mention that. That's something we
Well, I'm glad you
work
did.
on.
It's the biggest complaint. I don't really get it in the Mat-Su. I get it more in Soldana, Homer, Kenai. But one of the bigger complaints I get is the state has all this land, and it's a nightmare. Nobody can lease it. People want to lease it. It's going to the weeds, and we would absolutely run cows out there, but we just can't. They won't lease it to us. And I don't know how that works, but it sounds like that's part of the problem.
Yeah, and that's part when I said we came up with all these recommendations and why we said you need a Department of Ag, because you have to have somebody that works all that out, because you have the Division of, land, mining, and water. It's in the Department of Natural Resources. That's where the Division of Ag resides. And what happens, and why I was a big champion, I don't want a big bureaucracy. I don't want to spend a bunch of money. I don't want burdensome regulations. But when the Department of Natural Resources commissioner, in our state, they're called commissioners. Those are the governor's cabinets over it's the governor's cabinet, the heads of all the departments. Some states they're called secretaries. Here they're called commissioners. So your Department of Natural Resources, DNR commissioner, sits at the cabinet table, and he or she has oil and gas, mining, all these things. All these industries that produce revenue or are the tax bases that we use to pay for our troopers and our schools. So what becomes the priority for that commissioner? Naturally, he's got to make sure those industries are getting what they need. So the Division of Ag is in that department. It's tucked away, but it doesn't, get a lot of attention or time or become a priority. And so moving that division out and basically, changing the word division to department, now you get a commissioner at the cabinet table that would be there, every year and for all the governors. And so those things become, get the time and attention they deserve. So that's one of the reasons. And these land issues can cross over into different divisions and different things. So, but you have a commissioner who can make sure that you work through all that tangled maze to make sure that the farmers' needs are being met. So
I personally see the advantage of that. And what I tell people is, I don't like government as much as the next guy, but when you're competing with oil and gas in a state where ag isn't really even built yet, we don't get the strategic priority that we deserve as farmers. However, the number one question I'm going to get asked, so I might as well ask it to you now, is how would you respond to people who are going to say, well, government's going to do what it does and grow, and how do we prevent this Department of Agriculture from becoming a hindrance? Is it going to cost us money? Is it can I trust them?
Okay.
Along those lines.
So, and keep that hemp question on the back burner.
I will.
I do want to come back to So, first of all, you need to make sure that the people that we put in office are limited government people, like I am, and keep that going over time. But there's also something that I'm going to implement because, this is a Farming Alaska show. It's not about Alaska's fiscal situation, but our fiscal situation is pretty dire.
It's not good.
As far as the state level. And so one of the things, we have pretty high spending per capita and everything, and we got to rein it in where it makes sense and make our government more efficient and effective and responsive, to the public. But one of the ways to do that is something called a sunset commission. And bear with me for a minute.
Okay.
A sunset commission is an independent audit that's not under the governor and it's not under the legislature, but it's appointed by the governor, confirmed by the legislature, and it is auditing agency by agency, getting into the weeds, walking into the offices, interviewing staff, looking at the files, and deciding, just like a private business would, how could we improve? How could we be more efficient here? Do we need this many employees? Or maybe in this particular department, they're so delayed in responding to the private sector, they actually do need 2 more staff people. Or, this agency could be, it's duplicating what's happening over here. These could be combined. So what you end up doing, states that have these sunset commissions, they save hundreds of millions of dollars. But they're also going to be looking at regulations and things like that that would be burdensome. That would be part of the job. And the way it works, we all watched Doge work, where
I
they
was going to
just
say
came.
this sounds very familiar.
But what with that was temporary, and Congress could come back and do. Sunset Commission is very different because they don't issue a report that's going to collect dust on a shelf. What they issue is a piece of legislation with all their recommendations in it that would become statutory. In other words, you have to become more efficient. And then they take that legislation, which is their recommendations, and it goes to the legislative branch, and the legislative branch has two choices. It can ignore the bill, but if they do, that agency sunsets. That's why it's called a sunset commission. In other words, that agency goes away. Other states that have done it, they've actually allowed agencies to sunset. So, and the public gets to weigh in on this year-long audit process. Then they get to weigh in on the legislative audit process. And frankly, if the Department of Ag were doing something that was really burdensome to the ag community, they would have a chance to really let these auditors know. And auditors, they don't have any skin in the game. They just want it to be efficient. If they hear from the ag producers that the department is doing something that is cumbersome and screwing with them as far as their ability to do what they're trying to do, that's going to be addressed. And when these bills when the bill comes to the legislature, the agency can be sunsetted, as I said, or they can move it through the process. And when they move it through the process, it goes through committees, and the legislators can make changes. But what we've seen in other states that have done this is the legislature is respectful of the hard work of the audit team, and they end up retaining 80 to 90% of the recommendations. So you end up with, a more efficient agency that is responsive to the public and meeting the needs of the private sector. So that is part of the answer. But the other thing is you've got to make sure you have limited government people in, somebody that's not going to grow a bureaucracy and think that the government's the answer to everything. So those two things, I think, will keep it in check.
I'm pretty impressed with that answer. Sounds like we need that regardless of agriculture. We just need one of those.
Oh, we need it for all
sunset
agencies.
committees anyway.
And by the way, Texas has saved hundreds of millions of dollars over the year with the Sunset Commission. So
I like how disarming that sounds, the Sunset Commission, but in reality it would kind of scare you if you're a state employee.
Yeah, and the process right now, without getting into the whole fiscal situation, is the way it is now, we have like a $15-16 billion budget, which in other states, it's a fraction in some of these high-populated states. But what happens is the legislators are in our state capital, which is down in southeast Alaska in Juneau, and they're roughly about 4 months. And you have the department heads, the commissioners come up and defend their budgets, and it can be multiple billions of dollars for a budget. And here you're sitting in a committee hearing for an hour, a couple hours here and there through that time, trying to figure out, how to spend billions of dollars. It's no private business would ever be able to stay afloat with that kind of a budgeting process. So the audit process really provides the support for, and it's independent, so it provides the support for the governor who proposes the budget, so he knows, what is really needed here. And it provides the support for the legislative branch who actually makes the final decision and decides what to appropriate. So it's a good idea. And I think, I floated it in some hearings in the last couple of years.
How'd it do?
It got I was in the minority, so they don't let minority bills go through, but it created a buzz in the building. Yeah. And both Democrats and Republicans, for different reasons, thought it would be good for information they wanted. As governor, I can't implement it under law because the legislature has to pass a law.
Right.
But what I plan to do is right out of the gate is have an audit done, so I know how to I have to offer a budget right away, but I'd have the audit going too, because then I can come back and make revisions. But I would set up a sunset commission in the governor's branch, which is not ideal. is not ideal because the legislature would question whatever my commission have. But I would say, I'm setting this up now, but I don't want it. I want it to be independent, but you guys need to pass the bill so it moves out
so a
from
little
under
bit
me.
of
Yeah,
gentle pressure there.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, good deal. Sometimes, most of the time, they need that. So let's talk hemp. Let's talk about industrial hemp.
Yeah, it was actually Senator Johnny Ellis, who was a Democrat senator at the time when I was in the House, and he was going to be retiring, and it seemed to make sense. And it was actually a farmer in Palmer who was raising cattle, and he had done some mission work, I think, in South America. His name was Larry DeVilbiss. Do you remember hearing about
Oh,
the
yeah, he
DeVilbiss
does
farm?
great hay.
Yeah. So, he's now back in the mission field and no longer farming. That was the father. I think his son-in-law maybe is doing some work on that farm now. But anyway, he was interested because I think some of the farmers in South America were using it as fodder or whatever. And he thought, I wonder if we could grow it. He knew before statehood that we grew it. In fact, it was the biggest crop in the United States, the most prolific and money-producing crop in the U.S. in the early years.
Thomas Jefferson, right? He had a bunch of
Yes.
hemp. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and also I think the sales on the Mayflower made of hemp, all kinds of things. And it was the big newspaper giants who put hemp out of business, and they
I
lobbied
read
for
about
restrictions.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, because they were investing in paper mills.
Yeah.
And so hemp went out of favor, and the tide of marijuana, was brought in. So anyway, Johnny Ellis, back in the, I don't know, it must have been 2013-14, had a bill. Farmer Larry DeVilbiss talked to me about it. So I tried to help right at the end before he retired. We couldn't get it through, but it got me curious, and I started studying it. And so I brought it back, and we got it passed. But what's happened since, and for all those curious, well, once we got it passed, the people of the Division of Elections told me they'd never had any more phone calls on any single crop in Alaska.
Really?
Than they had inquiries about hemp. So it was people really curious and thinking about might want to try this. And then things have somewhat come to a screeching halt with that, because what happened, and this was happening in all the states, Congress had defined hemp, how you could distinguish it from marijuana, by, I think it was by weight. And so we use that same definition so it wouldn't be toxic, and so that's how we did it. But people in this world are pretty innovative, and some of the people that were creating edibles were able to somehow make a brownie or a nut bar or whatever be toxic using hemp. And so they could sell it like at a 7-Eleven, and so a 12-year-old could go in and buy it.
By toxic, are you meaning like active THC?
Yeah,
in there?
active
Okay.
THC.
So you get
exactly.
high if you
Yeah,
eat this.
you basically,
That's
right.
terrible. Yeah.
So we had to kind of put a screeching halt. And what happened, we'd have to talk to the Division of Ag Director, Brian Scoresby, but I think now the Marijuana Control Board, until this gets sorted out, they kind of have some oversight, which is exactly what I did not want, because I wanted to be treated like an ag product. So I have advocated in D.C., they do the Farm Bill. A Farm Bill is supposed to be passed, that they get this definition fixed, that we can solve it. I think once that is fixed, you'll see interest in it again. But just like you talked about Scandinavia, showing us, we've got potential. My understanding with hemp, first of all, it was grown up here before, the whole paper mill thing. But Canada and northern China have multi-billion-dollar hemp industries. So, there's real potential for Alaska. And back to the affordable housing thing, you get cheap land. We reinvigorate the timber industry because, we have our trees grow fast. We don't have the big redwoods that California have. We have like birch trees that grow pretty quickly. So we can harvest and we get the regrowth really quickly. So we reinvigorate the timber industry, because right now we're importing lumber to build homes.
Which is just, that drives. If you haven't been to Alaska, there's so many trees. I can't believe
I know. Little Rhode Island, I think, has a bigger timber industry than we do.
No, say it ain't
yeah,
so.
and it's like, so affordable housing, cheap land, like we talk about, we reinvigorate timber industry. But hemp, there's so many products you can make from industrial hemp. One of them is insulation for building homes. So,
okay.
these aren't things you're not going to snap your fingers, and you're not going to have this timber industry. You're not going to have hemp insulation out of hemp and all that overnight. But over time, we can do these if we're persistent.
Well,
and
if we were to open up the opportunity for investors, I mean, because that's the number one thing is no one's going to build a hemp mill if we don't know if we can grow hemp. So it is a chicken and an egg and a horse and a cart situation. But I'm glad somebody's talking about it in Juneau at least.
Yeah, and well, I'm not in Juneau anymore.
No, you're
I
not.
resigned
You're not.
A month ago. But people that know me.
Did you retire though? You seem pretty busy.
Well, I'm busier than ever because I'm running for governor. But a month ago,
Okay.
I officially resigned my seat so I could, because I was spending a tremendous amount of time, 40 plus hours a week doing that.
Are you legally required to do that?
No, legally, if I would go to Juneau in January when they bring the gavel down and start the legislative session, I would have been prohibited. Well, first of all, I would have had to be there, so I wouldn't be able to travel around the state.
Right.
I couldn't raise money. I didn't have to do it when I did, but I would have had to do it if I was a serious candidate.
Okay, so it's not legally required, but technically it's pretty much.
If you're going to run any kind of campaign, you have to do it. So yeah, it was happening, but.
Well, I do want to jump back to, and then we'll talk about the campaign a little bit, just because that's always interesting to people. But so you talked about the Farm Bill, and you talked about how these federal policies and these federal regulations impact Alaska and agriculture up here. So, are you familiar with the Prime Act?
No.
Okay. I got a lot of this at the Farm Bureau, but there's a lot of interest in people want to do, beef up here and goats and chickens and whatnot. And right now, the biggest issue is you can do cows, but you can't sell them very easily. You have to, if you want to sell them retail, for instance, you have to get them processed at a USDA facility, which we know we got one left or two left. It kind of fluctuates, but we don't have many options. And wherever that is, it's not convenient for everyone because Alaska's a huge
location,
state.
Yeah.
So the Prime Act is something going through the federal system right now where states could come up with their own plan to have local farmers sell their meat within the state, right? Because, once it's exported, then you do need a federal regulation on things.
Oh, this is where the state does the inspection.
The state would do the inspection.
So we actually got that in a bill.
Okay.
And that was the same bill I think it was the same one that set up the task force that's now expired as of July. But we did authorize that you could have a state meat inspection.
Okay.
Of course, it would have to be funded and set up. So we have that option out there. And by the way, we also set up a loan forgiveness program, a little bit different than what we have now, to incentivize people. In order for the loan for ag to be forgiven, there would be certain criteria where they'd actually have to be increasing food security. And so, it wouldn't be just like, so you grow food for your family, but you're actually getting your product
You're producing for the community.
Yeah, for the community.
You're increasing food security.
That also has not been funded at this point, but it would be to help young farmers because it's, you go to the banks and things, it's a little difficult.
Oh,
and
it's
that's
terrible.
That's why ag, yeah.
I'm an established farmer, and I still have, because all of the banks that will touch ag land are not in Alaska. Ag West has done some productive moves getting into Alaska, but as of now, it's if you want to buy farmland, you have to go through like a state program, or you have to really jump through a lot of hoops with somebody out of state. And people don't realize that it's like, even if we make land available, there's still that other issue of how are you going to finance it and buy it, because you're young and you're in Alaska. It's like most banks won't even talk to you at that point.
Yeah, so we can bring the cost of land down. That'll help. Part of what we did, and I don't know if it was in that bill or in a separate bill, is we modernized the loan limits for the revolving loan fund because they hadn't been touched for a long time. So I don't remember those caps now, but we lifted those considerably. But you got farmers here in Alaska, you got farmers in the lower 48 watching this, maybe thinking about coming up. One of the things that has been on kind of a hallmark of who I am is I don't claim to be an expert on everything. I'm not an expert. I'm passionate about it, but I need good ideas and input from people in the field as to what needs to be fixed, what we need to do. And part of my campaign, you said we talked about the campaign a little bit, is I've got policy committees working on different areas, and people that are experts, they know where the bottlenecks are or whatever, are coming in and making suggestions of what we can do to help free up, things so things can move and people can do what they're good at doing. So I welcome those kind of inputs from people in Alaska.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because most politicians I talk to are somehow experts on everything, which I don't ever believe.
Well, it's really funny. I want to tell you a story. So I didn't want to be, elected official. I was a little girl. Certainly not. And it just, things fell in my lap. And I always, I've been saying my whole life has prepared me for this. I'm a person of faith, and God's just, taught me different things along the way. And here I am. And so at one point, one of the things that got me, so I ended up being in the House and in the Senate and now running for governor, is I got a position. Well, I helped somebody with a campaign. That's kind of how it started.
Okay.
And then I got a temporary job in district being a legislative aide for that person.
Okay.
And then that job led me to an opportunity to do policy work for the Alaska Primary Care Association, which was all about health care. So primary care providers throughout the state, right? It was a statewide organization. And I got to learn the process in Juneau. I got to learn the process in D.C. And one of the first times I went into D.C., there was someone who was very trained in that field in going in and talking to legislators. And, I knew my stuff and I was all ready to go. And I walked in, and of course I was polite and friendly, and I said something, I'd love to educate you about this.
Ruh-roh.
And when we got out, the guy said to us, don't ever tell a legislator you're educating them on something because they think they know everything. And I thought, wow, that is, wow. And so I try to be a sponge, and when somebody walked in and into my office and they were an expert on something, I'd say, please educate me, and to me, if you are a public official, if you're an elected official, if you're a legislator, you should want the expert to come and help. You cannot know everything. And I don't know. Anyway, you just got to set your ego aside and say, I need the input. I don't have all the answers. And, what I seek to have is wisdom, to be able to discern what's a right strategy, what's a good idea. That's where, I try to do my best.
So on that note, we'll switch to more of just a personal, because it's interesting. How's it like being like a senator? Did you it's an odd job to have. Most people, don't get that job. How was that?
Yeah, I love to be able to solve problems and help people. So it was a good fit for me, and I love to learn. So that was good. One of the things I wasn't prepared for is how you get attacked from all sides.
Oh dear.
On things. So you can't do anything right. So you're gonna have some people agree with you, but you're gonna have a lot of people not agree with you. But also that, the way my brain is wired is also to try to bring people together on points of consensus. And so that was a good fit for me too, where you think I remember I was asked by some people in the insurance industry, they had some hiccup. I can't even remember. This was like 12 years ago what it was. And I went to the chair of Labor and Commerce, and he laughed. And he said, oh, they've been asking for that to be fixed forever, but you're never going to get it because the banks don't like it. I think it was the banking industry didn't like it. And, I saw that as a challenge. And so I got a conference room, and I brought the insurance people in, and I brought the banking people, and we had several meetings. We worked through, what was really the problem, how could we fix it, how could we make the language so it would take care of this hiccup, but it wouldn't create a problem then for this other industry. And we worked through it, and we came back through. And, at that time, that Labor and Commerce chair, he's passed away since, but he was dumbfounded that I figured out how to get those people at the table and figure out a solution. And we did it. So I love doing that. And, to actually get things across the finish line, not just talk about the problem, but actually start finding some solutions and having actual tangible outcomes. So with ag, that's what I want to do, and at least get us on the road to do that. And, you were talking about the congressional work on some of these bills. I love that too. And so when we hit the problem with the hemp definition, I need to go back and revisit that, but I made sure, for instance, that our federal delegation knew, and then I reached out to some of the key legislators from other states, some of the big farm states that were lead and were chairing the committees to make sure they knew it. And I know there is work being done. I don't know the status of it, but I understand at the state level, a lot of these things rely on the people at the federal level doing what they need to do. So you have to be persistent and pressure them to do it. One of the things that is necessary for ag in a big state like ours is a transportation infrastructure system, which we have very little.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't live in Alaska, Google Alaska road map. See how few roads we have on our massive state. So one of the things that I worked on, and I got Trump at the end of his first term to sign it. I can't say I got it, but I was the lead in the legislature. I know Don Young at the time was still alive. He was pressing it. But that was to get the president to sign the presidential permit for us to have a rail line that would cross into Canada, because that would open up.
I was reading about that.
So we've got that set. It's been signed. It was a kind of a private sector project that went defunct on the Canadian side. I don't know the status, but at least we got it done. And I remember Trump was exiting office, and it was the month of December, and I literally was calling the White House like 5 times a day, every day for a couple of weeks to make sure that got signed. And he signed it before he left office. So that's sitting there ready. But the persistence to put pressure in D.C. is part of the role as, the next governor that I would take pretty seriously, because
if you're going after federal land.
So many issues for us, we need the federal government. And Trump actually has been pretty good for Alaska. If you're anyone who's followed things, we had more executive orders by the Biden administration targeting Alaska than Iran did, the Middle East did.
Really? Is that true?
We did.
Wow.
And one of Trump's first thing is on his first day of office, he had executive orders specific to Alaska, undoing a lot of that so that we can move forward with many things. So, and he will only be president for 3 years once our new governor comes in. So that's another reason why you want someone who understands the issues, who knows the people, has a track record of, being very persistent and knows how to get the ball, down the field. And so, we'll have our work cut out for us.
So last question, how is running for governor different than running for Senate? And, how are you holding up? Seems like a lot of work.
I guess I'm an odd duck because it gives me energy.
Yeah.
I love, in fact, I wish I could have been interviewing you, and I want to talk to you more because I want to know from your perspective, what you think we need to do. And I don't know if we can make the show longer or if you have to run off and do something
No, absolutely.
Here.
We can.
But I would like to know it. And so the difference is, of course, my Senate district is right here in the local area, so easy to get out and about and talk to people. With a big state like ours, we have
I can't imagine.
It's expensive traveling, and that's why I need support. And I'm going to say my website again, AlaskansForHughes.com. And seriously, if you're one of the national listeners and you are interested in the potential, the prospects of farming here in Alaska, you're going to want me as governor. So don't hesitate.
I got two things on that. Number one, the number one question I get asked is something stupid, usually like, are there penguins or, do you live in the typical Alaska stuff.
Yeah.
The number two question is, how do I homestead in Alaska? Does that program still exist? So I can tell you just from this show and the stuff I do on social media, lots of people are interested. But how would you respond to people saying we don't want more people in Alaska, keep Alaska Alaskan? Because you're going to get some of that.
Well, we're never going to be California or New York, and the people.
Thankfully.
If you're thinking about coming up, you better be hardy. You better be able to handle the cold. You better be able to handle a lot of darkness in the winter, and you'll enjoy sitting outside and reading a book at 1 a.m. in the summertime. But it takes a certain kind of persistent character to live in this state, so I don't think we're going to become overpopulated. But we do need more ag producers. I'm excited because I did a food security workshop just kind of it wasn't just an experiment. In the law that we wrote that set up the task force, we were supposed to produce reports, but one of our task force was, as part of that, was can't remember the verb that was used, but I think it was promote food security at the community level, right? And we hadn't really done that. And so I went back to it was kind of towards the end, and it was talking to my task force, 35 members or so. I said, we don't have any money for this task force, but here's an idea. How about anybody that lives in a different communities offered to set up a food security workshop? Nobody else took me up on it, but I did it here, and I did one in Palmer. We used the Palmer Junior Middle School.
Mm-hmm.
We had a great turnout. We used the cafeteria, and all we did was advertise it, and then my chief of staff scheduled various people who were expert in raising sheep or in raising bees or growing this or growing that.
Yeah.
And they came and we had a schedule, and I don't know, each person got 15 or 20 minutes to kind of so anybody else in the room who's interested in that thing would know who the contact person is. They kind of explain a little bit about their experience, and then afterwards people sat at tables where they could go and get more information. Well, actually, I do want to try that. And so we were building those relationships between local experts and people who are wanting to try. Well, one of the beauties of that thing is seeing the number of young people that came.
Yeah.
There's an interest. I think there's a revival among young people wanting to get back
100% agree.
Get back to
100% agree.
Back to their roots. They don't want the hustle and bustle, of a concrete jungle. They want to raise their family in a simple lifestyle, and they're a lot more interested in nutrition as well. I love my daughter-in-law. I have family here, and she's very careful what her children. She wants them to have wholesome foods and things like that. And so I think there's a lot of interest. But at that security workshop was not only the young people that came, but some of the presenters. I didn't know who she had lined up, but you may know them. They're a couple of brothers, and they've got something that's up the Parks Highway. They're doing chickens, and they're trying to support their families on this.
Oh, I think I might know them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're brothers. And then there's Ken Hoffman.
Oh yeah.
Who,
yeah.
he was
on the show actually.
Yeah, he was an accountant, like in an office setting, and wanted to stop doing that, and he figured out how to do it.
I got my degree in aviation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I just wanted to farm, wanted to get, and there's a lot of people like that, I think, and I think Alaska's uniquely set up to have an economy that can actually support that. You're not going and competing against these massive 10th generation farms. You can set up a farm here, you can sell to your community, and you can be relatively economically independent by doing that. And that's what I think the opportunity in Alaska is for producers.
I wanted to mention something else that I think is important, because this came from
Sure.
Who's a cattle farmer up in Delta? All I can think of is our Bruce, the
There's
barley farmer.
Scott Mugrave.
Yeah, it's Scott.
Okay.
Scott. So one of the things, and Scott participated in our task force, and he made it very clear that if you want meat, if you want beef consistently, reliably on all our store shelves and in our freezers and refrigerator components of all our grocery stores in Alaska, you have to have an export market, because the cattle farmers cannot scale up they don't have, in order to have the capital to scale up to the economy of scale to be able to fill our grocery stores, they need a bigger market. So we only have 740,000 people across a massive state, and with the transportation, the cost of moving goods. So to really scale up, to get the economy of scale, they need an export market. Look at a globe. We're very close. We're the closest of the U.S. to the Asian markets. Some of those countries, think of Japan, of how large their populations, how little land they have. They would be hungry, and that is a pun intended, for what we could sell them. And some of their diet and the kind of foods they fix, they lose lots of veggies in the types of foods they fix. So, and the meats, and then Scott was also explaining some of the parts of the animal that we don't like, they would pay a high dollar for. So part of the solution to our food security here in our state is to explore export opportunities. And that's another thing for strengthening economy of a state. If you just stir the dollars around within our borders, you're maintaining your economy, but you're not growing and strengthening. It's actually outside dollars that come in. So whatever we can export is important. And like we were talking at the beginning, if we became the carrot capital, of course there'd be markets very hungry for those sweet carrots. So I did want to say that before finishing up. There was another thing I wanted to say before finishing up.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
For all those naysayers about a Department of Ag, I had he was a kind of a, grumpy, kind of limited government kind of, how can you support this? It's going to create a bureaucracy kind of thing. And I try to reassure him that's not what we're doing here. We don't want to burden farmers. We want to provide the support they need. Every farmer can't do their own research. We need to make sure they have research. You can't use the research from North Carolina. It's not going to work for our climate and growing season and our soils. We need to be able to provide that technical support. But when I tried to reassure him, and I said, by the way, who do you think, whose idea, what president do you think established the United States Department of Ag? Who do you think it was? And he was like, oh, it's probably some liberal. It was probably FDR. And I said, no, it was Abraham Lincoln who established the U.S. Department.
I didn't know that.
And his was about food security, that, our farmers are a very important industry. They need to be supply, the food that we need. Of course, that was just coming, when there was a lot of changes going to happen in the decades coming after his assassination in the late 1800s, 1900s, the Industrial Revolution, and how farmers were moving to the communities. So very important to have the support of the farmers, who now we're going to have to produce fewer farmers to produce food for a growing population, right? So, and the other thing is, I just had a friend, and she was my former chief of staff, and she's helping me with my campaign. Her name's Leah Preston. She was just in Washington, D.C. from some meetings, and she was noting that George Washington, and even some of the decor when he was president and things like that, he featured farming equipment and things like that because, that's what he loved and that's what he was. He was a farmer. And so it's part of our roots, and I believe it's something here in the state of Alaska that we can grow, and that is a pun intended also. But yeah, I think there's huge opportunity, and your listeners that are interested, again, I invite them to get involved, support my campaign, because I don't think there's any of the other candidates. I'm sure they would. Everybody loves farmers because everybody loves to eat.
I know a few guys who don't personally.
Yeah. Oh, but
maybe they just don't like me.
Everybody needs to eat, right, Dylan? So I think you're not going to have a governor who's going to go after farmers per se, but you're not going to have one as supportive and really wanting to move this sector of our economy forward like me.
Well, I can just tell you based on my personal experience, I usually get not laughed out of, but politely, oh, that's great when I bring up ag issues to the state level. That's not to disparage the Division of Ag. I know Brian, he's always been very helpful. I'm more talking about our elected officials, and farming just doesn't really register most of the time because we're a small bunch in the state. So
yeah, and part of the pushback in the conversations that we had down in the committee hearings, that one legislator seemed to think that it's going to die out because young people aren't interested in it. And it's like, no, not at all. And when I see, the 4-H and Future Farmers America, those young people come, and then just my experience with the food security workshop in Palmer when we had young people presenting, young people showing up, I think there's a resurgence of interest.
I maybe don't quote me on this. I'd have to do my research, but Alaska has the youngest per capita, of course, population of farmers, or if not the youngest, one of the top 5. The interest up here is huge as far as young being defined by the USDA as 18 to 35, I think.
Yeah, and also where in other states the number of farmers decreasing, it's been slightly growing here because and they might not, they're not big corporate farms, but actually the wave is, and like I said, the current federal administration is wanting to support the smaller farm, the family farm. So that's exactly what we have here.
Well, we all know we got a huge problem coming up because the average age of the farmer is like 65 or something crazy. I've said that a million times on the show.
That's nationally, right?
That is nationally, yeah. In Alaska, it's much younger. I think it's like 40 or 50. And it's growing and getting younger. So we need to encourage that, I think.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. If you like Shelley, you want to support her, what is the website to go to?
It's AlaskansForHughes.com.
All right, I'll put that in the description, too.
And I'll just say, it's a lot cheaper than other states when you run for governor, but you need about $1 million to run for governor. So, whether it's $5 or $500 or $50,000, we don't have limits here. So we need help, and I want to do the right thing for the ag industry. You guys are you're our lifeline, really, right? You got to have food to exist, and there's so much opportunity here. I'm excited about what it will look like. Think if I become the governor and we get things moving and it continues on, what's it going to be like in 30 years and 40 years here? It's going to be
I can tell you the climate's only getting better as far as the growing seasons go.
Yeah. Yeah, you're getting a little bit on each shoulder, aren't you?
Yeah. Especially in areas like Delta. I was talking to a farmer there, Clay, and he put up all his own weather stations because he didn't trust the data that was coming out. And sure enough, it's extending every year. It gets a little bit better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you again. I'm excited. And any final thoughts before we conclude?
No, I just, everybody out there, if you're out there farming, I have great respect for you. I know it's hard work. A farmer's work is never done, and it's never easy. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And whatever you can do to inspire young people, I do think that's important, passing that legacy on. Yeah. We didn't talk about how some of the technology can be helping. I was kind of a...
We could do a whole nother show.
Well, I don't know enough about that, but I've been kind of the tech champion also, which is odd because I'm not a spring chicken, but it's always fascinated me, and emerging technology. And so I've seen a little bit of how that can be used. One of my early pieces of legislation, I was actually asked to ban drones because people were afraid that drones were going to spy.
Did you?
And what I did is I said, I'll look at it. There were states where it was being introduced. When I looked at it, I said, wait a minute, we're a state based on aviation, number one. We don't have very many roads. And this could be a tool that could do all, whether it's search and rescue, counting wildlife, inspecting bridges or oil pipelines or whatever. I said, it's a tool. There's nothing inherently evil in this a piece of equipment. You want the operator to do the right thing. You don't
Right.
want an operator spying on someone. But we should not ban the tool. Instead, I worked actually to help get Alaska to become one of the first test sites in
No,
the
I was
nation.
going to say,
And so we're more advanced. We actually, they're going to be flying a small aircraft carrying supplies, unmanned. I'm sure they'll have a person sitting in it who can take over between Fairbanks and Nenana, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
They
So
they
we're
fully
yeah.
integrated a drone in the traffic pattern. Again, my degree was in aviation, so
Yeah,
I'm kind
cool.
of a aviation nerd, but completely autonomous drone, of course they were supervising it. It was cleared with the FAA, but it completed a traffic pattern at an international airport in Alaska, and we're the first state to do that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, and we've done stuff, out of the line of sight, and now we've got this aircraft that's going to carry some supplies. But so we're ahead in that way. So instead of banning them, I ended up actually working to help us by passing legislation, welcoming them, setting up a very short-term task force to address the public concerns. And I'll tell you the funny thing that changed the public. It was a video that went viral of a drone carrying a 6-pack of beer to some people that were ice fishing. And all of a sudden people realized, oh, these could be like little useful things.
Hell yeah,
And
brother. That's yeah.
So, that kind of changed people's tune, but we addressed those public concerns, and then the task force expired, but worked hard to allow them to present in the legislature, reassure the public that people were using them responsibly. And like I said, we got the test site, and now we have it's a small industry here, but we have some activity going on.
Just like land, we got a lot of airspace to offer.
Yeah. So, and I know they're using technology and drones actually for detecting. I don't know up here in Alaska, but
I actually
detecting,
I had a company reach out to me. They wanted to demo some crop spraying drones because no one's done it up here, and it'd be good PR for them, and it'd be fun for me. And I need to reach back out to them.
and they were detecting like by the color to like what a plant needed, or what needs to be watered, or I don't know what.
Call it See and Spray.
Yeah.
It's a new technology when it comes to fertilizer and herbicides and direct the efficiencies we're going to see in farming it's going to be on par with the Industrial Revolution. It's just we got to prepare for that.
Yeah. So for young people that you're not going to be out there with a hoe. You're going to have a really cool piece of equipment that you will be using. And by the way, did I tell you when I first lived in Hoonah and we were trying to grow and that we didn't have a tractor, we had oxen.
Oh wow, really?
And we were featured in the National Geographic. We looked like something out of another century. And we did get a small tractor later. It wasn't like we were opposed to
Is there any photos of that?
Probably. I don't have a copy of the National Geographic. The Alaskan magazine did a story too back when that was being published on a monthly basis. But
okay, that's really cool. You use oxen?
Yeah, Pete and Joe were the names of the oxen.
Pete and Joe.
Yeah.
Here's Pete and Joe.
Yeah.
I tell you, maintenance is easier on an oxen. Probably.
Yeah. Jacob Smith, a longtime friend. I need to get in touch with him. He was the one. He trained those oxen, and I'd go up and down the field, and we'd be working out the field, and there would come the oxen. I mean, pretty crazy. And you'd have the ocean. You could see the ocean. You could see the mountains.
Well, that had to be
fun. It was really something.
Huh. Well, that's really. I did not know that about you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks again. I'll put our website in the description, and check it out if you want to support Shelley's campaign here. And I just want to thank you again for what you've done for ag in this state and for making the time to come all the way out to Point McKenzie and talk to me and let some other farmers via me ask you some questions. We did get a shout out when I was asking the farmers. This is from Leslie in Matsu, and she said, thank you for supporting 4-H this whole time.
Yeah. And I'll say when you go to that website, alaskansforhughes.com, there's a place to contact me. I mentioned I need good ideas. What do I need to know? What needs to be fixed? And that's a way you to feed information to me on any ag policies or any positions I need to take, and so you can do that through that contact form. That's helpful. And I'll just say in closing, for a well-functioning constitutional republic, we have a constitutional republic, right? For it to function properly, it has to be a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just me talking to you, but it's you giving me information, because we're a representative form of government. So I'm not just going to, march in there and do all these things on my own. If I did that, it'd be a disaster, right? It wouldn't work. So it's really important for me to hear from people, what do we need? And this isn't just during my campaign cycle. This is while I am governor. I will need that kind of input. So it's been something I've done as a senator all these years. I've tried to be really accessible. I would have coffee chats all the time. Anyone was welcome. And, we would follow up. We'd take those ideas. Anything that I ever brought forward wasn't just something I cooked up. It was someone presented a problem, had an idea of how to fix it, and then that's what we work on. So that's going to be the same as governor. I need to hear from you and get your input. So
I have a similar struggle with the Farm Bureau, because most farmers up here are staunchly independent, which I respect, I like. But they're like, I don't need to join an organization, just leave me alone. It's like, if you don't speak up, nature abhors that vacuum, and it will be filled for you, and then you're going to be really distraught with the result. So totally agree. It's a two-way street, and farmers are a hard crowd because we do like to be left alone, but we got to speak up, and we got to.
And the ag project that happened, whenever it happened, my understanding, part of that problem is it was a bunch of bureaucrats making some of the decisions, and it should have been the farmers making
Tale
the
as
decisions.
old as time. Yeah.
So you all need to be involved, or it's not going to work, and I want you involved. So, yeah, please step up, speak up.
Well, you heard it here. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.